Hello, my beautiful people. Today, we're going to be talking about relationships and how they affect your credit. Thanks for watching. It's Ryan Hamer here, and you may be wondering, what do relationships have to do with my credit score, and how can there possibly be any kind of connection or correlation? Well, let me explain. Your attitudes about money, they might not necessarily be your own. And you may disagree, but hear me out first. What if I told you that your attitudes about money are derived from your outside influences? Your outside influences being your older brother, your mother, your father, your sister even, grandparents, people around you that are close to you, that you trust, that have an immediate impact and influence on you, and their habits bleed over into your subconscious and your psyche and have helped shape your beliefs about money. You might look up to your brother, look up to your sister, and see the way that they handle money, see the way that they spend money, and decide that maybe that's how you want to spend money and deal with money and save money, or not operate under the parameters that they've subjected you to by your observations. So we always hear the saying, money doesn't grow on trees. Parents have always told us things about money, right? They've said that, hey, you know what? I had to work since I was 6 years old, or I've been having to work since I was 3 years old and stuff like that. And you know what? The whole depression baby thing is real. There are people that grew up during the Great Depression. And those of my young folks that are watching this video that don't know about the Great Depression, look it up. That's your homework assignment for today. Learn about the Great Depression, because it had a great and significant impact on the mindset of grandparents and parents, for that matter, who grew up in that era. So when you grew up in that era, there was no such thing as credit, right? They didn't have credit cards. They didn't have stuff like that. And they believed in, if you can't afford something, you don't buy it. They believed in, you pay for everything in cash. People didn't like owing anyone, because what happens when somebody has to come collect on the money that they owe? You know, it's a big carafaffle, especially if you don't have the money. So a lot of people that grew up in that era were good at saving. They were good at saving money, good at not spending their money and holding it for special occasions. You might notice that too, where your mom would always have like a cookie jar or something like that, where she'd be able to go and get money that she had saved. And they always have money. Whenever there was an emergency or something came up, there was always money to be found somewhere. And don't get me wrong, there are people that kind of did it the wrong way. They had it buried in the backyard, or buried in their pillow or something like that. I remember there was a story of this person had replaced their mother's dresser. Oh, Mom, I got you a new dresser instead of that old dresser, and this and that. Well, the mom had like $30,000 stuffed at the back of that dresser. So she's like, what did you do with that dresser? And the daughter had given it away, and so there was a big scramble to acquire that dresser, and she never told her. She never told her that she had that money in the dresser, for obvious reasons. But this just goes to show that older folks have a different way of doing things. We look at things, and we're looking at things right now, but they would always look ahead and think ahead. And so relationships back then were different too. Right? So the man would come home, the husband would come home and just give his paycheck to the wife. And she would take care of everything. She would segregate the bills and pay accordingly. I mean, there are traditional values which I believe and hold dear that have been brought here into the 21st century, where we look at things and things are different. I mean, sometimes you have couples in relationships where one person handles all the finances, or one person just works, or they both work and they have a joint account. They have the same account. They put all their money in the same account, and they divvy up their money and they pay the bills that way. Some couples have segregated accounts, where husband has his own, wife has her own, and they pay their own bills and come together whenever they need to. And that works for some people too. The question I propose in this video is, What sorts of money habits do you hold dear and near? And did they rub off on you, and were they instilled in you from your parents? And are they good and are they bad? I'd love for you to just leave them in the comments. What sorts of things, like old sayings, because usually it comes in the form of old sayings, right? My dad would always say, if I have 99 cents, I do not have $1. So his whole thing was change matters. Every single cent matters. You know, he'd walk into our bedrooms. If he saw spare change on the floor, he'd pick it up and put it in his own piggy bank because he felt that we weren't utilizing it or saving it, or we didn't care about money if we were just going to let the money stay on the floor. And the whole thing is he was a miser and very frugal in that respect. And I always remember that. And I always remember my mother always having money. And if there was an emergency or something came up or whatever, she was a great saver too. So in your relationships with your partner or partners that you've had, who's the better saver, you or them? Do they have the mentality where, I've heard this one too, oh, well, you know, money is there. It's there to be spent. You know, that's why you have a credit card. It's there to be used. And so my point is, are you one of those people who believes that the credit card, the line of credit is there to be used? Are you using it for investment purposes, or are you using it to cover your consumer debt, your household expenses? And what are you doing with your paychecks? How is that coming in? And are you and your partner working together? Or do you find that when you've been in a relationship with someone, they've been selfish? And I hate to bring the S word into it, but yes, selfishness and money sometimes go hand in hand with somebody who has the wrong attitude and the wrong mindset. Sometimes financial IQ doesn't bless everyone. Sometimes people are big spenders, crazy spenders, and they'll spend it on whatever habit they have. Sometimes people have a habit, whether it's buying lottery tickets every week, a latte factor where they buy their coffee every single day, or whether it's shoes. I know some people that spend a lot of money on sneakers, and I know women that have a lot of shoes too. They will buy shoes and hide them in their closets or hide them in the trunk of their car so their husband or significant others don't see and freak out on them based on the cost, because they're running up their credit cards and doing that, and they just can't help it because it's a want. It is not a need. I find that older folks in their relationships, they are able to differentiate between wants and needs. Necessity versus reality versus the desperate need of the time or the moment. And they tend to also not operate off of emotional decisions. I find that these days, a lot of times people operate off of temperamental, emotional, snap judgment decisions, impulse buys, if you will. And that can be detrimental. That can hold you back. And this leads to contempt and disagreement and arguments. So are you and your partner on a plan, a financial plan? Do you have a 5-year financial plan? Are you on any type of monthly budget? Or are you flying by the seat of your pants and paying your debts and bills as they come? Have you actually done a top to bottom financial reset and looked at your finances, looked at your expenses, and figure out ways in which you can increase your positive cash flow? And when I talk about positive cash flow, I simply mean after expenses, positive cash flow is the money that is available to you, that is liquid, that you can utilize for something else. Whether it be an investment or to throw at a bill, extra money to throw at the principal of another bill. And if you and your partner cannot talk about money, that's a huge, huge disconnect. Huge, huge disconnect. Too often, the relationships break down not because of infidelity, but financial misappropriation and improprieties. One person's not telling the other person about the bills that they owe or they truly had. I heard a story about a couple that got together and the wife was she was in deep debt, and she never told the husband. And the reason is, husband was hardworking, but he didn't have a job at the time, and she made more money than him. And sometimes in relationships, when one partner makes more money than the other person, or they are making the only money in the situation, there is a disconnect with respect to the respect that is given to the other person. Now, we all get caught up in a clinch, and we all end up falling in the meantime, in between times, and in this uncertain downturn of the economy and uncertain times, sometimes people are getting laid off, sometimes people are losing their jobs completely, permanently, and sometimes companies are just closing down, switching up, and in this big exodus of jobs no longer being on site, they're being remote, job descriptions are changing. And, you know, a lot of relationships suffered and faltered during the great C-19 situation. There were a lot of couples that broke up. There were a lot of domestic situations and a lot of arguments that came up because a lot of times the partner is at work. One person is either at work or both people are at work. And there is the acceptable amount of distance and time and space away from one another. But now you guys are at home with each other and you're talking to each other, having to face each other and walk on top of each other. And a lot of people couldn't handle it. Relationships were just blowing up. And then, you know, with money being reduced, the amount of money being reduced that was coming in over this whole situation, some people still had their jobs, some people were still on the road, some people were not. And then it forced people to have a serious, sober second thought or a serious, sobering look at your finances. And then you realize the amount of money that was going out into, you know, eating out, ordering in, or spending on this or spending on that. And a lot of people were able to save money, but a lot of people were able to realize that, hey, I'm spending so much money on this person. I'm spending a lot of money on this joker. I'm spending a lot of money on this demanding, ungrateful person. And that contributed to issues as well. Some couples were able to become better for it because they were actually able to have these meaningful conversations in which that they discussed their wants, their needs, their desires, and their frustrations with regards to the existing status quo. And they were able to make those necessary changes and move money around and pay things differently and understand what was important so that they could strengthen their relationships. Because you know what? Your relationships are directly tied to money, and your credit is affected for sure. Those that have joint credit cards, joint lines of credit, authorized users on loans and things of the sort, or authorized users on credit cards, they are able to see, people actually started looking at their credit card statements and wondering, hey, what's this? What's this hotel here? Or what is this purchase here on Amazon? And people went crazy. Amazon made so much money during the pandemic because people were just sitting at home, nothing to do. So it became like addictive. They wake up in the morning, oh, let me see what I need on Amazon. Let me just buy something today. Husband would come home from work and see this stuff, and he's like, what the heck is this? Or they would come home, the wife would come home from work and see that husband has purchased some new golf clubs or something like that. And he's like, it was on sale, it was on sale. And so a lot of these issues came into play in the relationships when they didn't have a choice but to see each other more often. Some couples were better for it because they actually had these discussions that they needed to have. Some difficult conversations and some meaningful conversations as well. The way your parents handled money, the way your parents taught you about money, the way you may have observed your rich uncle or your frugal uncle, or the way you may have observed your older sibling handle money definitely had an effect on you. Definitely has a direct correlation with how you see money. Or you could be one of those people that maybe you grew up in a single family household and you didn't have both parents. So you only had a one-sided view of how you should handle money, or how money is handled, or how money is seen. But your relationships are definitely affected by money. Now, what happens if you get into a relationship with somebody and you like that person, you love that person, you're into that person, and you, big T coming, trust that person? You allow them access to the inner sanctum of your finances. You allow them access into the inner recesses of your emotional being. And you trust that person implicitly, completely. And then what happens? Because a friend of mine told me this story the other day. Her ex was one of those people that was, how should we say, good for nothing, and he ended up running up her credit cards and running up her lines of credit, and she was like $50,000 in debt, and it was insane. It was insane. She was in so much debt, she didn't know what to do. So she ended up filing for bankruptcy. And what also ended up happening was her own mother ran up her credit too. Took a trip to Acapulco on her dime, on her credit card, and this is what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's not even just a relationship with a significant other. It could be a family member that does it to you, because I've heard of brothers and sisters doing it to people too. So what happens when that happens? Obviously, your credit score takes a hit. Obviously, your credit bureau takes a hit. You may have to file for bankruptcy, or you might do credit counseling, or consumer proposal, debt consolidation, or you just might hunker down and pay down the bill yourself. Then when you do that, if you do any of these methods, what happens? How do you look at money after the fact, after you've been jaded, after you've been hurt, after you've had your trust broken, had your heart broken? How are you able to look at yourself and trust yourself, believe in yourself, and be okay with trusting other people after you finish beating up yourself for letting it happen in the first place? These are significant situations, and we are victims of our stories. The characters in our lives contribute to the way the story is told and the way the story plays out, whether it be the end, the middle, or the beginning of your story or journey. And when you get into another relationship, you are going to have these stories within your subconscious, which contribute to the way that you treat your partner or you treat situations. So I encourage you to stop, take a minute, and think about how you perceive money. How do you perceive credit? How do you perceive your existing debt? And do you think the way you do because of a previous relationship, because you were wronged by someone that you loved, or somebody you trusted did something to you, a bad business deal gone bad, gone sour, or is it because of the way that your mother handled money or the way your father handled money? And do you feel that you are who you are because of that upbringing or that positive or negative experience? Because I believe there is a connection. And that connection is pretty much what drives you. The connection to that particular experience is what's going to drive you this way or that way, left or right, forward or backwards, up and down. And you're always going to be a negative person when it comes towards money, or you're always going to be a positive person when it comes towards money, or you're going to be indifferent, depending on your experience. And I'd love for you to leave a comment for me on whether you agree or disagree, or if any of what I've said in this particular video has resonated with you. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Please feel free to like, share, and comment. Share this video with somebody who you think might appreciate this video. Have a good one. My name is Ryan Hamer, and until next time.